So there's Tommy Bridges, 12 years old, sitting in what can only be described as the galaxy's most overrated gladiator pit. And he's thinking that maybe, just maybe, his parents should have sprung for the insurance package on their family space cruise. You know, the one that covers abduction by hostile alien empires and being fed to giant space lizards for entertainment purposes. But no. Dad had to go with the budget option. The Draconian Empire's premier coliseum on planet Scalethorn was exactly what you'd expect from a species that thought the best way to solve disagreements was with teeth and fire. Think Roman Colosseum, but with more scales, more screaming, and significantly more health code violations. The crowd of alien spectators filled the tiered seating, a mix of species that all seemed to agree on one thing: watching smaller creatures get torn apart was quality entertainment. Tommy adjusted his position on the sandy arena floor, and looked up at the towering Dracos surrounding him. These weren't your friendly neighborhood lizards. These were 8-foot-tall bipedal dragons with enough teeth to stock a dental museum and enough attitude to make a honey badger look cuddly. Their scales gleamed like black armor, their eyes glowed like molten gold, and their claws could probably open a can of soup without breaking a sweat. The lead Draco, who Tommy had mentally nicknamed Bitey McBiteface, stepped forward with all the confidence of someone who'd never lost a fight in his life. His voice rumbled like a diesel engine with anger management issues. "Human child," Bitey announced, "you will provide sport for the Empire. Fight well, and your death will be swift." Tommy blinked. Then he reached into his backpack, which somehow the Dracos had allowed him to keep, probably because they figured what's the worst a 12-year-old could be carrying. A juice box? Some Pokemon cards? He pulled out a worn paperback copy of the complete Grimm's Fairy Tales and held it up like it was Excalibur. "Actually," Tommy said, with the kind of calm that only comes from either advanced meditation training or complete psychological breakdown, "I was wondering if you guys wanted to hear a story instead." The arena went dead silent. Even the crowd stopped their bloodthirsty cheering. Somewhere in the distance, you could hear the sound of a draconian brain trying to process what it had just heard. Bitey's massive head tilted to one side like a confused dog. "A story? Yeah. You know, once upon a time, happily ever after, that kind of thing." Tommy flipped through the pages casually. "I've got some real classics here. Ever heard of Goldilocks and the Three Bears? It's about breaking and entering, but in a cute way." The other Dracos looked at each other with the kind of confusion typically reserved for people trying to assemble furniture from Sweden. One of them, slightly smaller but with particularly impressive horns, leaned toward Bitey. "Commander Fangbite," he whispered. "What is he doing?" "Ah. So Bitey's real name was Fangbite." Tommy made a mental note that his nickname skills needed work. "I have no idea, Lieutenant Clawcrush," Fangbite replied, not bothering to lower his voice. "This is unprecedented." Tommy settled into a more comfortable position, cross-legged on the sand. "Look, where I come from, when you're dealing with scary monsters, you've got two options. You can scream and run around, which honestly seems like a lot of work. Or you can try the bedtime story approach. Works great on my little sister when she thinks there's something under her bed." The crowd was getting restless. Some alien in the upper seats shouted something that probably translated to less talking, more mauling. Commander Fangbite raised a clawed hand for silence, his golden eyes fixed on Tommy with laser-like intensity. "You compare us to things under beds. Well, you're big, you're scary, you make a lot of noise. And you showed up uninvited," Tommy said cheerfully. "If it walks like a monster under the bed and talks like a monster under the bed." And with that, Tommy opened his book and cleared his throat. "Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Goldilocks." Now, if you've ever tried to read a bedtime story to a room full of apex predators who were expecting a light snack and some entertainment, you'll understand that the atmosphere was what you might call tense. The Dracos stood frozen like statues, except statues don't usually breathe fire when they're confused. Commander Fangbite's tail twitched with the kind of nervous energy usually reserved for cats watching laser pointers. He kept opening his mouth to say something, then closing it again, which gave him the appearance of a very large, very dangerous goldfish. "She walked through the forest," Tommy continued, completely ignoring the fact that he was surrounded by creatures that could turn him into a Tommy-shaped scorch mark on the arena floor, until she came to a house. She knocked on the door, but nobody answered. Lieutenant Clawcrush leaned forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over Tommy. "Why did she not announce herself properly? This is a clear violation of territorial protocols." Tommy paused mid-sentence and looked up. Because she's like 8 years old, and it's a fairy tale?" "What is a fairy tale?" asked another Draco, this one with particularly impressive spikes running down his spine. Tommy decided to call him Spikes a lot. "It's a story that teaches kids lessons through, talking animals and magic and stuff that doesn't actually happen." Tommy realized he was entering dangerous territory here, but in a fun way, not in a lying way. The crowd was getting seriously restless now. Alien spectators were throwing what looked like space popcorn and making noises that probably translated to very impolite suggestions about what the Dracos should do with their prisoner. Emperor Blaze Claw's voice boomed from the royal viewing box, a sound like thunder having an argument with a volcano. Commander Fangbite, what is the meaning of this delay? The crowd demands blood. Fangbite looked up at his emperor, then back at Tommy, then at his lieutenant, then at the book, then back at Tommy. The poor guy was clearly having some kind of existential crisis. Sire Fangbite called back, the human child appears to be malfunctioning. I'm not malfunctioning, Tommy said indignantly. I'm trying to tell you about Goldilocks. She goes into the house, see, and there are 3 bowls of porridge on the table. Porridge, Spikesalot interrupted. What tactical advantage does porridge provide? Well, it's breakfast. You need proper nutrition for pillaging and stuff. Tommy was making this up as he went along, but the Dracos were nodding like this made perfect sense. So she tries the first bowl, but it's too hot. Inadequate temperature control, Lieutenant Clawcrush noted seriously. Poor preparation leads to mission failure. Right, so she tries the second bowl, but it's too cold. Logistical oversight, Fangbite agreed grimly. But the third bowl was just right, so she ate it all up. The Dracos exchanged glances. Spikesalot cleared his throat, which sounded like rocks in a blender. She consumed another warrior's rations without permission. That's actually not a bad point, Tommy admitted. I never really thought about it that way. But yeah, she basically broke into someone's house and ate their food. The arena had gone from restless to dead quiet. Even the Emperor had stopped yelling. Every single creature in the Colosseum was leaning forward, waiting to hear what happened next. Then she went into the living room. Tommy continued, getting into the rhythm now. And there were 3 chairs. Defensive positions, Lieutenant Clawcrush murmured approvingly. She sat in the first chair, but it was too hard. The second chair was too soft, but the third chair was just right, until it broke into pieces. Commander Fangbite's eyes widened. She destroyed enemy equipment, completely wrecked it. Excellent tactical thinking, Fangbite said with what might have been admiration. Deny resources to the enemy. Tommy was starting to realize he might be onto something here. What happened next was something that would probably go down in galactic history as either the most brilliant diplomatic maneuver ever attempted or the weirdest case of Stockholm Syndrome on record. Because as Tommy continued reading, something absolutely incredible began to happen. The Dracos were getting invested. Like really invested. So after destroying the chair, Tommy went on. Goldilocks was getting tired from all the breaking and entering, so she went upstairs and found 3 beds. Sleeping quarters, Spikesalot nodded sagely. Smart. Rest is essential for maintaining combat effectiveness. The first bed was too hard, the second bed was too soft, but the third bed was just right. So she curled up and fell asleep. Commander Fangbite's massive head tilted forward. She fell asleep in enemy territory, without posting sentries, without establishing a perimeter. She's 8. Tommy reminded him. Inexperienced warrior. Continue. The really weird part was that the crowd had stopped complaining entirely. In fact, they were leaning forward in their seats, straining to hear every word. Tommy could see aliens in the upper tiers cupping their ears, or whatever passed for ears in their species. Now, while she was sleeping, the 3 bears came home. Bears. Lieutenant Clawcrush's voice went up an octave. What are bears? Think of them as smaller versions of you guys, but with fur instead of scales, and they mostly eat fish and berries instead of people. Inferior predators, Fangbite concluded. Well, that's what Goldilocks thought too. Until they found her in their house. The silence in the arena was so complete you could hear a pin drop, if pins made any sound when they dropped in alien atmospheres with different gravitational constants. The Papa Bear looked at his porridge bowl and said, "Someone has been eating my porridge." Tommy put on his best gruff voice, which wasn't very gruff, but the Dracos seemed to appreciate the effort. The Mama Bear looked at her porridge and said, "Someone has been eating my porridge too." And the Baby Bear looked at his bowl and said, "Someone has been eating my porridge," and they ate it all up. Spikesalot made a low rumbling sound that might have been sympathy. The young one lost his entire ration. Gets worse, Tommy said. Then they checked the living room. Papa Bear said, "Someone has been sitting in my chair." Mama Bear said, "Someone has been sitting in my chair too." And Baby Bear said, "Someone has been sitting in my chair, and now it's broken." Commander Fangbite actually winced. Property damage. The intruder was escalating, so they went upstairs to check the bedrooms. The tension in the arena was thick enough to cut with a knife. Tommy had never had an audience this engaged, not even when he'd told his little sister about the monster in her closet who was actually just her jacket hanging on the door handle. Papa Bear roared, "Someone has been sleeping in my bed." Mama Bear growled, "Someone has been sleeping in my bed too." And Baby Bear squeaked, "Someone has been sleeping in my bed, and she's still here." Lieutenant Clawcrush gasped, which was a sound like air escaping from a very large tire. They caught the infiltrator. Oh yeah. Goldilocks woke up, saw 3 bears staring at her, and did the only sensible thing you can do when you wake up in someone else's bed surrounded by large predators. The entire Colosseum held its breath. She jumped out the window and ran away as fast as she could, and never came back. For a moment nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Tommy was pretty sure nobody even breathed. Then Commander Fangbite did something that Tommy was absolutely certain had never happened in the history of the Draconian Empire. He clapped. It was a slow measured clap, but it was definitely applause. Within seconds, Lieutenant Clawcrush joined in. Then Spikesalot. Then the entire arena erupted in the most polite confused applause Tommy had ever heard. "Outstanding tactical retreat," Fangbite declared. The small warrior recognized superior numbers and chose survival over engagement. Admirable. But what happened to the bears? Spikesalot asked. Did they pursue? Did they implement better security protocols? Well, Tommy said, closing the book with a satisfied snap, "That's where the story ends. But I've got about 300 more where that came from." The crowd was on its feet now, or whatever appendages they used for standing, cheering and making noises that in any other context would have been absolutely terrifying, but now just sounded like enthusiasm. Emperor Blazeclaw's voice boomed across the arena, but this time it sounded less like impending doom and more like genuine curiosity. "Bring the human child to my viewing box. I must hear more about these tactical scenarios." Tommy stood up, brushed the sand off his jeans, and tucked his book under his arm. He looked up at Commander Fangbite and grinned. "So, does this mean I'm not getting eaten today?" The Emperor's viewing box was exactly what you'd expect from someone who ruled a galactic empire built on conquest and intimidation. It was carved from what looked like solid obsidian, decorated with the skulls of various defeated enemies, and had cushions that were probably made from the hides of creatures that were definitely extinct now. The whole thing screamed, "I have daddy issues, and I'm making it everyone else's problem." Emperor Blazeclaw himself was something to behold. Imagine taking a regular Draco, feeding it nothing but protein powder and anger for about 50 years, then giving it a crown made of what appeared to be crystallized fire. He was easily 10 feet tall, with scales that shifted from deep crimson to molten gold depending on the light, and eyes that looked like they'd seen the heat death of several solar systems and enjoyed the show. Tommy was escorted up by Commander Fangbite and what appeared to be half the Imperial Guard, all of whom kept shooting him curious glances like he was some kind of exotic pet that had learned to juggle. So Emperor Blazeclaw rumbled as Tommy was deposited on a cushion that was definitely more comfortable than anything he'd sat on during the family space cruise. "You are the human child who refuses to die properly." "That's me," Tommy said cheerfully. Tommy Bridges, professional not dying person and amateur storyteller. The Emperor's massive head tilted, studying Tommy like he was a particularly interesting science experiment. "These tales you tell. They are not tactical reports. Nope, just stories. Made up stuff to entertain kids and teach them lessons, mostly about not breaking into other people's houses and eating their food." "Made up," the Emperor repeated slowly, like he was tasting the words. "You mean fiction?" "Yeah, exactly, fiction. Pretend. Imaginary." Tommy pulled out his book again. "Like none of this stuff actually happened. It's just fun to think about." Emperor Blazeclaw was quiet for a long moment, his golden eyes fixed on the worn paperback in Tommy's hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than before, almost uncertain. "In all my conquests across 17 star systems, I have never encountered anything like this. Our archives contain only battle reports, territorial surveys, and resource assessments. We do not have stories that did not happen." "Seriously?" Tommy blinked. "What do you guys do for fun?" "Fun?" The Emperor looked genuinely confused. "You know, entertainment, relaxation. Stuff you do when you're not conquering planets or breathing fire at people." Commander Fangbite cleared his throat. "We sharpen our claws, maintain our weapons, practice combat formations. That's not fun. That's work," Tommy said. "Don't you ever just, I don't know, sit around and imagine what it would be like to be someone else, or think about magical places that don't exist, or wonder what would happen if animals could talk?" The silence that followed was so profound that Tommy wondered if he'd accidentally insulted their entire culture. Which, as it turned out, he kind of had. "Our society values strength, conquest, and tactical superiority above all else. Emperor Blazeclaw said slowly. We are taught from hatching that imagination is weakness, that fiction is a waste of mental resources that could be devoted to combat strategy. Tommy paused, trying to find a diplomatic way to say it. That sounds really boring. Another long silence. Then, to Tommy's complete amazement, Emperor Blazeclaw laughed. It was a sound like boulders rolling down a mountain during a thunderstorm, but it was definitely laughter. Yes, the Emperor said. It is incredibly boring. Well then, Tommy said, settling back into his cushion. How about I tell you about Little Red Riding Hood? It's got tactical elements too. There's disguise, infiltration, and a woodsman with an axe. The Emperor's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. A woodsman with an axe. This sounds promising. Tommy opened his book and found the right page. Once upon a time there was a little girl who always wore a red hooded cloak, so everyone called her Little Red Riding Hood. Distinctive markings, Emperor Blazeclaw noted approvingly. Easy identification for friend or foe. Her grandmother lived on the other side of the forest, and one day Little Red's mother asked her to take a basket of food to Grandma, who was sick. Supply run through hostile territory. The Emperor murmured. Standard logistics operation. Right. So Little Red set off through the forest, but she didn't know that a big bad wolf was watching her. Wolf? Commander Fangbite leaned forward. What are the tactical specifications of this wolf? Well, he's smart, sneaky, and he talks. Plus he's got really big teeth. Acceptable adversary, the Emperor decided. Continue. The wolf decided he wanted to eat Little Red Riding Hood, but he was too smart to attack her in the open forest where someone might hear her scream. Emperor Blazeclaw's tail swished with interest. Intelligent predator. Considers operational security. So instead he ran ahead to grandmother's house through a shortcut he knew. Superior terrain knowledge, Commander Fangbite observed. Classic advantage. He knocked on the door and disguised his voice to sound like Little Red. Grandmother, it's me, your granddaughter. Let me in. The Emperor actually gasped. Voice mimicry? Deception protocols? This wolf has excellent infiltration skills. The grandmother let him in, and the wolf ate her up in one gulp. Efficient elimination of primary target. The Emperor noted with what sounded like professional admiration. Then he put on the grandmother's nightgown and got into her bed, waiting for Little Red to arrive. Disguise and ambush tactics, Commander Fangbite said appreciatively. This wolf understands combined arms strategy. Tommy was starting to realize that every fairy tale was basically a military operation when you looked at it through draconian eyes. So Little Red arrived and knocked on the door. The wolf called out in his fake grandmother voice. Come in, dear. Maintaining operational cover, the Emperor murmured. Little Red went to the bedroom, but something seemed wrong. Grandmother, she said, what big eyes you have. And the wolf replied, all the better to see you with, my dear. The Emperor was leaning forward now, completely absorbed. He's maintaining the deception while revealing superior reconnaissance capabilities. Brilliant psychological warfare. Grandmother, what big ears you have. All the better to hear you with. Grandmother, what big teeth you have. And Emperor Blazeclaw was practically vibrating with anticipation. All the better to eat you with. And the wolf jumped out of bed and swallowed Little Red whole. What? The Emperor shot to his feet. All 10 feet of imperial fury. That's it? The wolf wins? Superior tactics and strategy triumph. Well, not exactly. Tommy said, trying not to laugh at the sight of the galaxy's most feared ruler having an emotional investment in a fairy tale. See, there was a woodsman nearby who heard the commotion. Ah. External reinforcements. He burst into the house with his axe, saw the wolf with his big full belly, and figured out what happened. So he cut open the wolf's stomach and out popped Little Red and her grandmother, both perfectly fine. Emperor Blazeclaw sat back down heavily. The wolf's operational success was reversed by inadequate perimeter security, and failure to account for local armed response. Exactly. And then they filled the wolf's belly with rocks and sewed it back up, so when he woke up he was too heavy to run away, and he fell into a well and drowned. Poetic justice, Commander Fangbite declared. The predator becomes the prey. But here's the thing, Tommy said, closing the book again. What do you think the story is really about? Emperor Blazeclaw considered this seriously. Superior tactics can be defeated by superior tactics. Well, maybe. But mostly it's about not talking to strangers, and how sometimes the people who seem helpful might not have your best interests at heart. The Emperor stared at Tommy for a long moment. You mean, the tactical scenario is also a lesson about social interactions? All the best stories are. They're not just entertainment, they're ways of teaching people about life without having to experience all the dangerous stuff firsthand. Emperor Blazeclaw was quiet for so long that Tommy started to wonder if he'd broken the most powerful being in the galaxy. Finally the Emperor spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. We have been conquering worlds for millennia, seeking new challenges, new opponents, new territories to claim. But we have never encountered anything like this. These stories, they provide tactical scenarios, moral instruction, and entertainment simultaneously. That's the idea, Tommy said. And humans create these regularly. Oh yeah, thousands of them, millions, probably. We've got stories about everything. Talking animals, magic kingdoms, space adventures, time travel, robots, wizards, you name it. The Emperor's eyes were glowing brighter now, like someone had just told him about a planet made entirely of weapons-grade plutonium. Tommy Bridges, Emperor Blazeclaw said formally. I believe we need to renegotiate your status as a prisoner. Now Tommy had never been in a position to negotiate with an intergalactic emperor before, but he figured the same rules probably applied as when he was trying to get extra allowance from his parents. Be polite, be confident, and always ask for more than you actually expect to get. I'm listening, Tommy said, trying to sound like he negotiated with genocidal space dragons every Tuesday. Emperor Blazeclaw began pacing around the viewing box, his massive form moving with surprising grace. These stories of yours represent something we have never encountered. A form of mental warfare, perhaps? Training simulations disguised as entertainment. I mean, if you want to think of it that way, Tommy said carefully. But mostly they're just fun. Fun, the Emperor repeated, like he was trying to memorize the word. Yes, we discussed this concept, the engaging in activities purely for enjoyment rather than tactical advantage. Commander Fangbite stepped forward. Sire, with respect, how do we know this isn't some kind of human psychological weapon? These stories could be designed to make us soft, Tommy snorted. Dude, you guys conquered half the galaxy. I don't think a few bedtime stories are going to turn you into pacifists. Besides, some of our stories are pretty violent. Ever heard of Game of Thrones? Game of Thrones? Emperor Blazeclaw's eyes lit up. This sounds military in nature. Oh, it's got politics, warfare, betrayal, dragons, and enough backstabbing to make a soap opera jealous. Plus nobody you like survives. The Emperor practically purred. Tell me more about these thrones and games. Well, that's going to take a while. It's like 8 really long books. Or you could watch the TV show, but fair warning, the ending is controversial. 8 books? Emperor Blazeclaw stopped pacing. You mean there are stories that require multiple sessions to complete? Some stories take years to tell properly. We call them series. And then there are shared universes where multiple stories connect to each other, and expanded universes where other people write new stories using the same characters, and fan fiction where people write their own versions of existing stories. The Emperor sat down heavily, like someone had just told him that math was actually fun and he'd been doing it wrong his entire life. How many of these stories do humans possess? Tommy thought about it. I honestly have no idea. Millions? Billions? We've been telling stories since we figured out how to talk. Every culture has them, and we're always making new ones. Millions, Emperor Blazeclaw whispered, and that's not even counting movies, which are like stories but with pictures and sound, or video games, which are like stories where you get to be the main character and make the choices. Stop, the Emperor held up a massive clawed hand. You're telling me that your species has developed an entire industry around creating fictional scenarios for entertainment purposes. Several industries actually. Books, movies, TV shows, games, comics, radio shows, podcasts, audiobooks, streaming services. Tommy ticked them off on his fingers. We've got stories about everything. Romance, adventure, mystery, horror, science fiction, fantasy, historical fiction, contemporary fiction, literary fiction, young adult fiction, children's books. Emperor Blazeclaw's breathing was getting a little heavy, and humans enjoy consuming these stories. Well yeah, some people read for hours every day. Some people binge-watch entire TV series in one sitting. Some people wait in line for days to see the latest movie in their favorite franchise. They voluntarily dedicate significant time and resources to fictional scenarios. Absolutely. We spend billions of dollars on entertainment every year. The Emperor was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the arena where the crowd was still buzzing with excitement about the Goldilocks story. When he spoke again, his voice had a dreamy quality that was frankly disturbing coming from a 10-foot-tall apex predator. Tommy Bridges, I am prepared to offer you a deal. I'm listening. In exchange for your freedom and safe passage home, you will provide us with a collection of these human stories. Tommy pretended to consider this, even though he was internally doing backflips. I don't know, I mean just giving you a bunch of books seems kind of inadequate. Stories aren't meant to be read alone in silence. They're meant to be shared, discussed, experienced together. What are you proposing? Well, Tommy said, settling back into his cushion, what if instead of just giving you some books and leaving, I stuck around for a while as your official storyteller? I could read to groups, lead discussions, maybe even teach some of your people how to create their own stories. Commander Fangbite looked alarmed. Sire, surely you're not considering keeping the human child as a permanent resident. I'm considering it very seriously, Commander. The Emperor's voice had taken on that tone that suggested disagreement would result in incineration. Continue, Tommy Bridges. Here's what I'm thinking. You guys have this amazing gladiator arena that you use for watching people get torn apart. That's got to get boring after a while. What if we converted it into a storytelling amphitheater? You want to turn our sacred coliseum into a reading circle. Not just reading, interactive storytelling, dramatic readings, maybe even some theatrical performances. Think about it, you've got perfect acoustics, tiered seating, dramatic lighting. It's basically a theater already. Emperor Blazeclaw was nodding slowly. The crowd did seem engaged with your presentation. They were totally into it. And that was just one story. Imagine if we had regular story sessions. Different genres, different styles. You could have adventure nights, mystery nights, romance nights if you're feeling brave. Romance? Commander Fangbite sounded like he'd bitten into something sour. Hey, even space dragons fall in love sometimes, right? Tommy grinned. We've got stories about that too. The Emperor stood up and walked to the edge of the viewing box, looking out over his empire. You would do this. Voluntarily remain here to share your species' stories with us. For a while, yeah, on a few conditions. Name them. First, I want regular communication with my family so they know I'm okay. Second, I want comfortable living quarters with good lighting for reading. Third, I want access to your imperial library so I can learn about your culture and maybe incorporate some draconian elements into the storytelling. And fourth. Tommy paused for dramatic effect. I want diplomatic immunity. Full ambassador status. If I'm going to be representing human culture to your empire, I want it to be official. Emperor Blazeclaw turned back to Tommy, a slow smile spreading across his massive features. It was the kind of smile that had probably made entire planets surrender without a fight. Tommy Bridges, Ambassador of Stories and Minister of Creative Affairs for the Draconian Empire. It has a nice ring to it. So we have a deal? We have a deal. But I have one condition of my own. What's that? You will begin immediately with this Game of Thrones saga you mentioned. I must know about these dragons and thrones and political maneuvering. Tommy laughed. Oh, you're going to love Tyrion Lannister. He's basically a tiny version of you but with more drinking and better one-liners. Excellent. Commander Fangbite, please arrange for the arena to be converted for optimal storytelling conditions. Comfortable seating, proper acoustics, adequate lighting, and send word to the outer territories. The Draconian Empire is about to embark on its greatest conquest yet. What conquest is that, sire? Emperor Blazeclaw's grin widened, showing entirely too many teeth. The conquest of imagination. 3 months later, Tommy was sitting in what used to be the most feared gladiator arena in the galaxy, but was now officially known as the Imperial Storytelling Amphitheater of Scalathorn. The changes were pretty dramatic. Where there used to be weapon racks, there were now bookshelves. Where there used to be blood-stained sand, there was now plush carpeting in a lovely shade of burgundy. Where there used to be spikes for impaling prisoners, there were now reading lamps with adjustable brightness settings. The crowd that had once screamed for blood now came equipped with notebooks, cushions, and what appeared to be the draconian equivalent of book clubs. They'd even started bringing snacks, though Tommy had learned not to ask what kind of meat was in the jerky. Emperor Blazeclaw had become Tommy's most dedicated student, showing up to every session with a list of prepared questions and what could only be described as fan theories. He'd become particularly obsessed with the political maneuvering in Game of Thrones and had started applying Westerosi strategies to his own imperial policies, which had somehow made him a more effective ruler. Commander Fangbite had discovered mystery novels and was now the president of the Who Done It discussion group that met every Tuesday. Lieutenant Clawcrush had developed an inexplicable fondness for romantic comedies, though he insisted they were valuable for understanding civilian psychological warfare. And Spikesalot had started writing what he called tactical poetry, which was actually pretty good once you got used to all the military metaphors. Tommy was in the middle of reading The Hobbit to a packed amphitheater, doing his best Gandalf voice for a crowd of 8-foot-tall dragon warriors who were hanging on every word, when the emergency alert sounded. It was a sound Tommy had learned to recognize over the past 3 months, the kind of alarm that meant someone was either attacking the planet or requesting an immediate audience with the Emperor. Given that the Draconian Empire didn't get attacked very often, it was probably the latter. Emperor Blazeclaw's personal communicator crackled to life. "Sire, we have a situation. There's a human fleet in orbit demanding the return of Ambassador Tommy Bridges." Tommy looked up from his book. "Oh, that's probably my rescue." The Emperor's expression was the kind usually reserved for people who'd just been told their favorite TV show had been cancelled. "Your rescue? Yeah, I mean it's been 3 months. My parents probably sent the cavalry by now." Tommy marked his place in the book. "Sorry guys, looks like we'll have to finish Bilbo's adventure later." The crowd made a collective sound of disappointment that would have been heartbreaking if it wasn't coming from creatures that could level city blocks with their breath weapons. "Sire," Commander Fangbite said urgently, "the human fleet is demanding immediate compliance. They appear to be numerous." "How numerous?" "Approximately 200 vessels, including what appears to be 3 Dreadnought-class battleships." Tommy winced. "Ooh yeah, that sounds like Earth's military when they're really upset about something. They probably think you guys kidnapped me." "But we didn't kidnap you," Spike Salot protested. "You're our Minister of Creative Affairs, you have diplomatic immunity." "I know that, and you know that, but they don't know that. All they know is that their cruise ship passenger got grabbed by scary space dragons and hasn't been seen since." Emperor Blazeclaw stood up, his full imperial presence radiating authority. "Then we shall inform them of the situation. Commander, open a channel to the human fleet." "Oh, Your Majesty," Tommy said carefully, "maybe I should handle this. Humans can be a little jumpy when it comes to large reptilian species making demands." The Emperor considered this. "Very well, but I want it on record that the Draconian Empire has treated you with utmost respect and hospitality." "Absolutely, you guys have been great hosts." The communication channel opened, and Tommy found himself looking at a very familiar face on the massive view screen that had been installed for movie nights. "Tommy," his mother's voice crackled through the speakers. "Oh sweetheart, are you okay? Are you hurt? Have they been feeding you properly?" "Hi Mom, I'm fine, really good actually. How's Dad?" "He's right here honey. We've been so worried. The whole fleet is here to bring you home." Tommy could see his father leaning into frame, along with what appeared to be several very serious-looking military officers. "Son," his father said, "just tell us what they want. We're prepared to negotiate for your release." "Well, that's the thing Dad. I'm not exactly being held prisoner anymore." Silence from the human fleet. "What do you mean?" his mother asked. "I mean I've got a job here now. I'm officially the Draconian Empire's Ambassador of Stories and Minister of Creative Affairs. I've got diplomatic immunity and everything." More silence. "Tommy," one of the military officers said slowly. "Are you saying you don't want to be rescued?" "I mean rescued implies I need rescuing. I'm kind of in the middle of something important here. We're revolutionizing an entire civilization through the power of storytelling." Emperor Blazeclaw stepped into view of the camera, and Tommy heard several very unprofessional exclamations from the human fleet. "Greetings, humans," the Emperor said in his most diplomatic voice. "I am Emperor Blazeclaw of the Draconian Empire. I want to assure you that Tommy Bridges is not our prisoner. He is our honored guest and valued cultural advisor." "Cultural advisor," Tommy's father repeated weakly. "The human child has introduced us to the concept of fiction," Commander Fangbite added, also stepping into view. "It has revolutionized our society." "Fiction, stories Dad." Turns out an entire galactic empire had never heard of bedtime stories, fairy tales, novels, any of it. They've been living without imagination for thousands of years. "And now," Lieutenant Clawcrush said, appearing on screen, "we have book clubs." "Book clubs?" Tommy's mother repeated faintly. "It gets better," Tommy said cheerfully. "We've converted their gladiator arena into a theater. We're doing dramatic readings, discussion groups, and I'm teaching some of them how to write their own stories. Emperor Blazeclaw just finished his first short story yesterday. It's about a dragon who becomes a detective. It's actually pretty good." The silence from the human fleet stretched on for so long that Tommy started to wonder if the communication had cut out. Finally his father spoke. "Son, are you telling us that you've domesticated the Draconian Empire with bedtime stories?" "Domesticated is a strong word. I prefer culturally enriched. They're not going to conquer Earth anymore." Emperor Blazeclaw looked genuinely confused. "Why would we conquer Earth? They're the source of the stories. That would be like destroying the library to get the books." "Actually," Tommy said, getting an idea, "we've been talking about maybe setting up a cultural exchange program. Some Dracos could visit Earth to experience human entertainment firsthand. Movies, concerts, theme parks, that sort of thing. And maybe some humans could come here to learn about draconian culture and help with the storytelling program. You want to start a tourist exchange with the galaxy's most feared predators? The military officer asked. They're not that scary once you get to know them. Commander Fangbite makes excellent tea, and Lieutenant Clawcrush gives great relationship advice. I specialize in romantic literature, Clawcrush said proudly. Tommy's parents looked at each other, then back at the screen. Honey, his mother said slowly. How long are you planning to stay? Well, we just started the Harry Potter series, and Emperor Blazeclaw is really invested in finding out what happens to Snape. Plus I promised to help them adapt some classic stories for the stage. We're thinking of doing Romeo and Juliet first, but with dragons. Romeo and Juliet with dragons, his father repeated. It's going to be epic, literally. We're calling it Romeo and Juliet and Dragons. Oh my. Emperor Blazeclaw leaned toward the camera. Perhaps you would like to attend the premiere. We could arrange diplomatic accommodations. Tommy grinned. So Mom, Dad, want to come to the galaxy's first interspecies theater festival. I promise the dragons won't eat you. They're too busy arguing about whether Hamlet's soliloquy works better in the original English, or translated into ancient Draconian. The view screen showed his parents looking at each other, then at the massive dragon emperor, then back at their son, who was sitting comfortably in what used to be a gladiator arena, surrounded by 8-foot-tall predators, who were apparently now theater enthusiasts. His mother sighed. Do they have good Wi-Fi? I'll need to update my social media. Nobody's going to believe this. The best in the galaxy, Emperor Blazeclaw assured her. We upgraded everything for the audiobook streaming service. And that, Tommy thought as he settled back to finish reading The Hobbit to his audience of reformed space dragons, was probably the most successful case of accidental diplomacy in galactic history. Though he was definitely going to have some explaining to do when he got back to school. Now, where were we? Tommy said, opening his book. Ah yes, Bilbo was just about to meet Gollum,